We'll go ahead and get started on the next
Very
one.
interesting topic.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. It's a fun topic. I'm with you on that.
Clicker,
Thank you, sir.
left, right, front, backwards. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So, Jerod. So this morning we've had a couple presenters come up from Cincinnati. We had one. Daryl's going to wrap it up for us from the local Dayton area, but we decided to go a little bit east. And we got one in from Columbus. So one great thing about Dayton is, kind of centrally located between Columbus and Cincinnati, where there's a lot of cybersecurity work and larger organizations going on. So we kind of have that reach out to both areas and able to bring some of this different speakers in from those different areas of work and type of environment. We're not just centrally locked in with most of the base.
We're able to get to that answer a lot more quickly than we were today. Now, quantum computing is not going to eliminate make that game any better. It's actually going to be less enjoyable experience, right? When we look at large data sets and we look at churning through those data sets to come up with meaningful information, that is a clear-cut practical use case for quantum. And so that's an important takeaway. It's not that we're going to have one or the other. We're going to have both. And so there are going to be some things we do in cybersecurity, traditional models that still apply, but there are going to be some things that shift and change based on where organizations start using these other, I don't even know what I'm pushing now. There we go. Pushing these other models. So as an example, and this is from Microsoft talking about quantum hardware. You've got apps, your classical compute stuff on the top. And then one of the more common ways that we're able to observe these qubits is we've got to slow them down enough so that we can actually take a look. And by slowing them down, and they're flying around the atoms, we're using cryogenics to just make things really, really cold. Now, I don't know if you've looked into cryogenics at all. It's a little more complicated than Fry and Futurama, just tripping into the container. It's expensive, and it's big, and it's one of the reasons that quantum is limited today, that it hasn't exploded, because just a matter of scale. There has been some innovation where one group was able to use magnets to slow down these qubits to observe them instead of cryogenics. And those magnets are less expensive, less cumbersome, smaller. But the way it happens, right, we do our compute on top, but we're passing stuff down to the lower layer, and then we bring it back up for the good stuff. I think I'm pushing the wrong button the whole time. And I talked about the magnets because they are less expensive, but then one of the whole challenges with quantum is as soon as we observe it, we change it, right? This is stuff that fascinates me that I still don't have my head around. But I would just say there are people a hell of a lot smarter than me who have been doing this stuff for years and have a good idea of what do we need to do next to make this stuff better and faster and more accessible. When I say years, this chart from devapedia.org traces quantum computing all the way back to 1935. Although the items in white are some of the bigger ticket items. And the ones I wanted to mention in 1980, where we had been looking at mechanical computers. We were looking at the Turing machine. For anybody who's seen, what was the movie? Was it Enigma Effect? with Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing, right? Fantastic, fantastic story. What is it? Imitation game. Thank you. And so we took this idea of mechanical computing to digital computing. But then when we got to 1980, there's this conference, and they start talking about computation as physics, which is where this idea of what else can we observe, how can we use that for computing. And then in 1982, we had topological quantum order, which is, again, beyond me. 1985, the idea of the universal quantum computer, which is like taking that Turing computational model and saying, well, what would it look like if we did it with physics components in using qubits? And then in 92, somebody dropped the first quantum algorithm, where they say, well, here's an example of, once we understand how to make this technology work, here's an algorithm we can apply to actually do these computations. And then 94 was like the tipping point. Shor's factoring algorithm. It's math. I'll leave it at that. But it makes this more real. And so from there, things start to pick up and accelerate. I'll get into error correction a little later, because that's one of the tripping points right now. But as we roll into 2015, 2016, which is when IBM first made quantum computing available in their cloud, and we're seeing more and more. Folks, it's 2022. 6 years ago, IBM made this available in their cloud environment. This is not science fiction. This has been accessible for years. And if I go back to like 1980 and start there, how many of you, if you don't mind show of hands, were alive in 1980? All of these changes have happened in your lifetime. Let that sink in for a minute. We went from this idea of, could we do this, to making it a commercially available solution that people have been using for years before the group of us got together today to talk about it. That's how quickly it's been moving, and it's not slowing down. When we look at what's coming next, in our space, post-quantum cryptography is all the jam. That's the big scary that we need to talk about. But I also want to point out from a business case, financial services really starting to use quantum. These are projections from futuretimeline.net looking ahead 2023, 28, and 38. There are businesses who are financially motivated to invest in this technology. And now that it's accessible and they're able to start seeing gains, seeing profits, they're going to invest more money in the technology. That's the nature of a capitalist economic system. I can make more money, I'm going to invest more money, make more money, invest more money. In our world, this notion of how do we keep the secret secret, that's post-quantum cryptography. Because all the crypto that we have today, sorry, not NFT, crypto, bro, crypto, all of the cryptography that we have today that protects data at rest, data in motion, data in memory, it will break when this ends up in the hands, when quantum technology ends up in the hands of people that we would rather it didn't end up in their hands. McKinsey and Company published some research, and they said industries like finance may begin to realize gains from quantum computing by 2025. That's a few years away. And this is another important takeaway. Realize gains means that's when they start to see that profit. So that's 3 years. 3 years from when they start to see the return on their investment that they are making today. It's not that they're going to start using it. Some of the folks here in this room may work for organizations who are leveraging this technology in one way or another. And I also saw that there's a couple of articles from IBM. There are an estimated 2,000 to 5,000 quantum computers that we'll see globally available by 2030 with mass adoption by 2035. 2030 is 8 years away, and we're talking high-end estimate, 5,000 quantum computers available globally. Not all of those computers will be used by trusted individuals. Some of those computers will be used by threat actors to target organizations like the ones we're trying to protect. Oh, gotcha.
If you want to adjust the resolution too, try that, because I'm not being to capture the slides, so I'm just...
Fingers crossed. Coming back.
Actually, while you're doing that for the internet, I'm going to do a quick plug and unplug just to see if I can get some.
All right, while we are adjusting, any questions about what I've shared so far? Nobody's left, so I haven't scared anybody too bad, and that's good. I'm not trying to scare people away. I'm just trying to give people perspective. That perspective, yes, sir, helps us do our jobs. Yes?
I didn't see any mention of Richard Feynman on that timeline.
Didn't see any mention of Richard Feynman. You guys are one step ahead of me. And what help me out. Who's Richard Feynman?
He's a Nobel laureate who proposed the idea of a quantum computing system.
I'm going to do my own research and update my presentation before I share it again. I appreciate that.
And also, you don't have David Deutsch. He's the first one that came up with a mathematical model for making a quantum computer. And Seth Lloyd from MIT made the first quantum computing component using chemicals to...
Yeah, you and I need to catch up after. I need to add like a Hall of Fame slide to this to really call out some of these folks.
I noticed in the book you referenced Arthur Clarke and Stephen Baxter. I recognize Baxter's name. Everybody was Clarke. I recognize Baxter's name. He wrote the Manifold series. Manifold Time and Manifold Space.
Okay, Manifold series. Take that as a recommend. I'm always looking at something to add to my list. Lester, thank you. Was there another question? Yeah.
I wonder if you could help this out for me. What's the connection between, I know there's a difference, but there seems to be a very fine line between high performance computing resources and quantum computing resources. Would you say that's true? And if it is true, what is that connection?
So is there a connection between high performance computing resources and quantum?
So high performance is what you term traditional, right? Or not? Or what is that the...
Yeah, this is a good question, and I want to present it in another way. And I can't speak to that, like high performance, getting into the details of what's in scope, out of scope there. But when I hear the term, I think of the terms malware and ransomware as an analogy, right? All ransomware is malware, but not all malware is ransomware, right? I can have this entire body of stuff, like malware, and then ransomware will be a subset of that. What I would think if and I'm just hypothesizing here, when we look at the idea of high-performance computing, yeah, good to go. Thank you. That as quantum computing becomes more and more accessible and available, it's likely to still be categorized in that high-performance computing, but you might still have digital computing that's also high-performance. But I don't know if anybody has another opinion, perspective to offer up on that. That's, yeah.
There is one more algorithm called Grover's algorithm, which was started in 1996. So where in unstructured database, it's easy to find any data. So it's called Grover's algorithm. That is like Short's algorithm, a milestone.
I'll have to look into that one. Yeah, what I am going to ask for the row here, right, or the column. If you're on LinkedIn, please send me a note with these notes. If you're not, Proton Mail. I can get you my Proton Mail. I've got one. Yes, sir.
I think to answer that, the difference that until like the last 2 years, quantum was more very specialized in the sense that it could only do certain things.
It wasn't really, you couldn't write a standard program to do just anything. Quantum bits were really made to do certain types of calculations.
Okay.
And then as they've changed over the last couple of years, they're starting to get into that, like you said, Turing kind of mindset where they now are becoming processors.
Got it.
I think that's the difference between like a supercomputer and a quantum, is until recently they were doing different things. But it's trying to change. I mean, we now just have one that's now 1,000 times faster, and now we're starting to do analogs that they're starting to compete with quantum. That's the same kind of thing.
Interesting. And for folks on the remote, I'll do my best to share what I can with what, because I know you can't hear everybody in the room. Yeah.
I just have a comment about the statement you have here. I don't know if you guys know Chase Bank. They have a big investment on this already. I know that because they still very high-level scientists from IBM become their.
So we're hearing some stories about some poaching quantum experts from one company to another. To follow the money, folks. It's really going to drive what happens in this space. So one other stat I picked up: the worldwide market for quantum computing is predicted to be more than $10 billion with a B by 2024, and $65 billion by 2030. And I know, highly technical crowd here, it's important to take these numbers and keep them in your hip pocket, because as we hit these milestones, that's when the changes are going to come into the organization, where suddenly we're investing in these technologies and we expect the people working in the organizations to have that knowledge. How many folks ran this on your home computers? If you ran it in a data center, don't admit to it in front of anybody. Right? SETI at home. I share this as, looking back to look ahead. So SETI at home, for folks who aren't familiar with the project, pointing radio telescopes out into space, listening, and then bringing back large sets of data and saying, boy, now we just got to go through all this data and look for aliens. Turns out the folks running the project didn't have enough computers or compute power to go through all that data in a timely fashion, so they crowdsourced it. They just put it out on the internet and said, hey, do you want to help us look for aliens? If so, run this program on your computer, and it can run in the background, it can run in the foreground. There have been a couple of sysadmins who lost their jobs by trying to support this project by installing it without permission on all the servers in their data center. But this notion of, I'm going to take a lot of data and find a more clever way to go through it, really hit me here. But as somebody who has an unfortunate family history of cancer, I've seen more people pass. There are good things from this technology. It's one thing to look at, let's look for aliens, right? That's neat. And I dig it. I really dig it. We can change and save lives when we take this technology and apply it in a way, like, let's get clever about looking through very large data sets. Quantum computing opens this up, right? This is a great use case. And I offer this up because when we talk about quantum in cybersecurity, it's easy to think, man, this is going to break all the confidentiality stuff that we've got in place today, right? If we can't rely on encryption, then I just had an executive at a company I support ask me this yesterday on a call, because before we got into the call, I was talking about coming out here today and talking about this. And he said, yeah, I heard about that. Doesn't that mean that cybersecurity is just not going to work anymore? And I had to say, well, it's going to change how we do some things. But it's important, while we're working on ways to secure technology while these changes are coming, that we don't resist or fight against this change. And that's a personal stance that I take, that if you can recognize the benefits of this, then figuring out how to enable people to do this securely saves lives. It has a big impact. So getting into the specifics of how does it impact us, Cryptography relies on random number generation. We count on whether it's hash generation or whether it's very strong encryption keys. That when we create data sets and then we're protecting them by encrypting them, that somebody else can't just guess that very large random number, right? We're counting on the fact that it's too complex for them to be able to get to the same data that we just protected. PKI also relies on secure key exchange mechanisms. And that's an important one to call out. We're not just trying to protect the encryption and decryption, but we're trying to protect the keys that we're using to encrypt and decrypt. And we've got to share them with people if we're going to exchange encrypted data with them. And this GSM standard relying on symmetric encryption, it's an important takeaway that it didn't hit me initially. When I think GSM, I think older cell phones, right? I think like early gen is anybody who goes and gets the latest and greatest, right? They're on 5G or LTE or whatever acronym we want to use today. They're not using GSM, are they? I don't know. But IoT devices, GSM is incredibly popular, as I understand it, as a way for those devices to communicate with one another. And when we look at IoT, and I'm going to ask because I don't know, if I look at self-driving vehicles, how is the data that's being sent to and from those vehicles encrypted? How's it being protected? Is that GSM? Does anybody know? Anybody?
More likely it's some version of LTE.
More LTE. Good. Yeah, get me started on the...
Most self-device modules
right.
That don't have high bandwidth usages are usually going to be given. Usually they're NB-IoT standards or M1 standards, LTE M1 standards, which are used to communicate as opposed to the chipsets, and it's often 4 or 5, and they use LTE or later band LTE communication.
Good. You seem to know a lot about LTE or IoT. Are you doing a talk today on that? I hope. No, I'm glad we got Dale here to bring that in. But even symmetric encryption, which when I look at TLS certificates on the internet, they rely on symmetric encryption. There are 3 examples here of things that just work securely today because the people who researched and developed these algorithms and these mechanisms for protecting data spent decades doing it. We put decades deploying it, and we've been spending that same amount of time securing it. And these are 3 of the top items at risk when encryption is no longer available. There was a quantum decryption proof of concept from combo effort between Google and the KTH Royal Institute of Tech in Stockholm. And they were using and this is for the math folks in the room, they were using modular exponentiation to demonstrate that if they had a 20 million qubit computer, they could break a 2048-bit RSA number in 8 hours, right? The amount of time it takes me to get my coffee to get my bourbon. And I know some of you will get that. But by comparison, it'll take a classical computer around 300 trillion years to break RSA 2048-bit encryption key. That's according to Quintessence Labs. And I've got the link here if you wanted to read the POC. But that's what we're talking about in terms of the exponential speed of breaking these very large numbers. That data that we thought was going to be protected for centuries or trillions of years is now potentially exposed to threat actors in the course of a standard business day. Yeah?
All right, a 20 million qubit quantum computer.
I like where you're going. Yep.
Last time was 60 qubits.
I think we might be about 100 now. So yeah, 20 million is currently pretty far off. And there's another important distinction I'll make. When we talk about error correction and whether or not those what do I want to say? Not functions, transactions, whatever they are, whether they're error-free or not, it determines whether or not the size of the quantum computer. You can actually achieve similar results with a much smaller quantum computer if you have error-free calculations, which is the word I was looking for a minute ago and couldn't find. But that's a good call out, right? That's why this is more of a thought experiment, right? They didn't demonstrate it because they actually had it. This was more of a projection of this when we hit this state, when we get this kind of computer, that's when it's going to break. But I mean, Pac-Man, how large is the Pac-Man game file? What is it, 32 bits? Not bits. Kilobytes? 8 bits? It's Pac-Man, right? And of course, I'm going to age myself here, date myself, right? That game was ridiculously tiny and dropped in, 81, 82? What's the latest Overwatch, right? The latest Halo, the latest Call of Duty. These are how many gigs? And we've got a shift. We've had a shift from a little character running around eating dots to fully immersive and interactive games where you just get totally caught up in these fictional worlds. Again, in the course of our lifetime, when we get to the point that we've got a 4,000-bit error-free quantum computer that can do those calculations, it's not as far off as that 20 million number makes it feel. Yeah?
Till date, there is only 127 qubit processor which has been developed by IBM.
Is what? One more time?
We just have the maximum number of qubits is 127 till date.
So today, 127 qubits is the current. Yeah. Give it time. We'll see that number grow. And it's the innovation. It's the people who are saying we don't have to freeze it, let's use magnets. It's the things that these people are thinking about and experimenting with, that they'll find ways to make this more error-free, more efficient.
Do you think it's going to follow Moore's law? Right?
Where it just... I don't see why not. And so the question was, do I think it's going to follow Moore's law? Does anybody think no? I mean, when I look at all things technology...
Maybe not. Or would it be faster than Moore's law?
Probably faster. That's frightening. Why probably faster? You got me wondering now.
Well, it's advancements in a lot of areas of technology outstrip Moore's laws.
Okay.
And doubling it, whatever it was. That was transistor capacity.
Yeah.
That was based on more of an ability to physically write so many transistors on this surface.
Okay.
Followed that Moore's law, and what we're doing now doesn't necessarily come down to the mechanics.
That's a good point. Moore's law was reflective of a different, earlier tech, and with advances in tech, can have
Some areas are less, some areas are more.
Yeah.
The ones that are going to drive the most finance and money will far outstrip.
The ones that are getting funded are going to be, absolutely.
So how many bits do we need? Should we do 2 to the 16th bits, encryption bits? Be reasonably safe for the foreseeable future?
It's a good question. So the question was, how many bits do we need to protect ourselves? And I do have some recommendations later. One's around jumping from an AES 128 to an AES 256 if you're using AES encryption, to make your data quantum resistant. But to protect your data from quantum attacks, we need to think about it differently. I've got a couple of things I'll get to in a moment there, but it's like we can't solve the problem based on what we used to do. We have to do encryption differently. This is the call out. It's an article from insiderintelligence.com that said that you could break RS, they didn't put the key strength, but using 4,000 error-free qubits, you can defeat RSA in seconds. And the stat I have over here on the right was related to that's the growth in e-commerce over the next 5 years. Because every transaction, right, somebody made the comment about buying from Amazon earlier today, right? I know how many Amazon boxes show up at my house, and I know I need to take the login away from some people. But
I think the important thing is they're using smile.amazon
Amazon.com.
And yes, good call out. Smile.amazon.com. These transactions require encryption to protect the credit card numbers, right? To protect the information. And so while we're seeing this change, right, where this technology is becoming faster and more available, we're also seeing a parallel trend, unrelated, where people are embracing all things online even more. And when we look at advances in augmented reality, virtual reality, how gaming is impacting the development of that space, because gaming has a huge audience and is drawing money in there. All of this underscores the need to get ahead of it. Another shift is this notion that we don't have to rely on the little plastic identification cards that we carry around in our wallets and our purses anymore. There are multiple states that already support digital identity, and more than 20 states have either considered, tested, or already launched those, including Colorado, Hawaii, Mississippi, Ohio, and the territory of Puerto Rico. When we're talking about protecting encrypted data, we're not just protecting Amazon purchases. We're protecting the identities that we use for applying for bank accounts, for applying for loans, for traveling internationally, for anything that requires an identity. Boy, it's kind of important to get ahead of keeping that data safe from people who shouldn't be able to use it or abuse it. And then the other uncomfortable conversation. With the SolarWinds hack, we saw a lot of data exfil. And people, and this has been true for people during that hack, anybody who's gone through a HIPAA breach of healthcare data, it was encrypted. We're okay, right? The attackers got encrypted data, so they got nothing. That is not true. If I have a criminal organization, if I have a state-sponsored organization who has their hands on an encrypted trove of data from a U.S. Branch of the military, pick one, that has op information, that has contact information, that has even in police departments, undercover individuals, right? When that data is decrypted, it's not just a credit card that's expired, so who cares? No, that's stuff that those people who want to exact revenge are going to be able to act on. People are going to die when that data is decrypted. And we are at a point that you can't just expire an undercover identity, right? Or expire the contacts who helped you in an operation against the controlling regime. And so that's not just a past thing. If you, at the organization you work with today, have an encrypted data store that, oh my God, I hope nobody ever gets their hands on this, and it makes its way out the door, you're not out of the woods just because it was encrypted. So what we're seeing, and this started this effort 5 years ago, right? So this is 2017. They said, we got to get ahead of this quantum stuff. What can we do? How about post-quantum cryptography? How do we encrypt data securely once quantum computing becomes more readily available? And they actually kind of went back to the drawing board and said, we just need new math, right? The math that we built traditional encryption models on, it's not just that we can use stronger keys, which is our instinct today. How strong can I make my encryption key? No, we've got to do encryption differently. Does anybody work with lattices in the math that you do? I don't know if that's... I took calculus. I was able to squeeze 5 years of math into a 4-year high school degree, and I don't remember a damn thing from my calculus class. I tried, but it was a stretch, and I've not been able to retain it. But they took 69 candidates for a post-quantum computing standard in round 1, and then put them through the paces. Round 2, they got it down to 17 candidates, and by this point, they said, we're going to do PKE and key establishment algorithms, and then we're going to separate those from digital signature algorithms. Slightly different implementation, so let's treat them differently. And then in round 3, they shortlisted that to 7 finalists and 8 alternates. And their goal was to publish a draft standard by 2024, which is about 5 years projected before Google and IBM have committed to a 1 million quantum, or 1 million qubit quantum computer going live. So as John mentioned at the top of the day, and then right before I stepped up here, on July 5th, NIST said, all right, we're good. Here's draft 1. We have, and I love this, the nerd in me, you can have crystals Kyber or crystals dilithium for PKE, right? KEM, or the digital signature. And then Falcon and Sphinx Plus are available for digital signatures. And then they've already got 4 more candidates for round 4: Bike, Classic, Elise, HQC, and Psych. So today, if you, well, don't do it because it's Saturday. Go home, hang out, have some fun. Wait till Monday. But if you wanted to start reading up on what's coming, what do I need to understand? You don't need to necessarily understand the ins and outs of these algorithms. Knowing what they are, knowing which vendors are trying to build implementations around them, knowing who's working in the open source community to build solutions that align with this standard. That's what we need people to learn today. And that's what we're going to need in the next 3 to 5 years when this becomes more readily available. And then also keep an eye on this NIST working group, because whatever they release next, it's going to be, what, another year, 2 years. That's going to drive how we solve this problem. It's not just, though, that we're building these solutions. Through the course of my career, I worked everything from hardware support to help desk to entry-level security analyst, managing building programs, consulting, sales. And I did this on purpose. I wanted perspective of what it's like to work in all these different roles. And when I put my sales hat back on and I look at the cybersecurity market that, Micah, you had those 2 graphs up here, it's nuts, folks. The amount of money that's being thrown into this space is unfathomable. And it's because it's that important. It's because that's how our world operates now. With all the technologies that drive everything from keeping our water clean to enabling those Amazon purchases. We need cybersecurity to make sure that things aren't being disrupted or broken. And so there are vendors who are already in this space of all things quantum and post-quantum. Quantum Dice and ID Quantique, their technology focuses on quantum random number generators. Ket's Quantum Security and Toshiba have the key distribution, and Quantum Secure Communications, which gets into fiber optics. PQ Shield and then CipherLock have post-quantum cryptography and quantum resistant technologies. And then Xanadu has full stack quantum machine learning. If this is your jam and you want to learn more about where this stuff is going, these people are already moving there quickly. Take a look at what they've published. Connect with them. If you use LinkedIn, talk to the people at the companies and say, what can you tell me about what you're doing? They want to tell people. They want people to know what's going on. And this is a short list. These are just a couple of the ones that stood out to me. There are a lot more folks in that space. But as that money is going into financial institutions who want to use quantum computing to make more money, then you're also going to have cybersecurity companies building quantum resistant and quantum, like post-quantum cryptography solutions to solve that problem. And then, you may not know this, but Congress actually passed the U.S. National Quantum Initiative Act in December of 2018. Didn't get a lot of press. There's a lot of other things that end up in the news. But one of the statements was, arguably the key bottleneck in quantum computing industry will be the lack of talent. While universities churn out computer science graduates at an accelerating pace, there is still too little being done to train the next generation of quantum computing professionals. It's not that we need folks to learn this today, it's that we needed them to learn it 5 years ago. And we're still, catching up and trying to figure out how do we get there ahead. That bleeds into, there's a resource I want to share in just a moment. I'm going to ask that if you look at Web 3 or anybody who follows Jack Dorsey, Web 5, Web 2 plus Web 3, put all the buzzwords and marketing aside. When we see the evolution of what we've called Web 1, traditional internet based on the semantic web paper, to Web 2, where organizations control the infrastructure and users are creating the content, which is where we are right now. Web 3 is the language we use to describe the decentralization of these technologies. Can I stand up a device at my house that has the ability to talk to a device at my neighbor's, that has a device to talk to their neighbors, and we create our own internet? You can do that today with, I2P, like Tor. There are a couple of alternatives to Tor that are built on that peer-to-peer networking. Well, if we look at the advances in 3D printing, accessibility of some of this technology, the growth of the maker community, there are all these things coming together and saying, look, we don't have to put all our data at Facebook or at Amazon. We can own it and make it our own and build things that, from a hardware and software perspective, decentralize that, take it out of their hands. There's even a term, DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. It's very common in Web3 about these organizations that don't really have a leader, right? They don't have a board, they don't have a CEO, but they still work. And this is real stuff that's already happening today. As you look at Web3 and some of the technologies that are coming out of the folks working in that space, we have an opportunity to think differently about privacy data. And now this is where I'm going to be a little heretical and say, what if we didn't have to encrypt social security numbers? I don't think we have to protect them once we get to this point. If I can take this notion of confidential data, there are certain data elements, not all of them, certain data elements that I can make publicly available. And I'm not talking the LifeLock CEO who puts his social, no, I'm not talking that. I'm talking when we change how people can use our private data. When this decentralization enables me to have more real-time control over that data, then if I go to apply for a car loan and somebody wants to run my credit and they need my social, I get a notification on my phone that it checks some blockchain that says, here's Jerod's social. We want to use it to run credit. Do we have Jerod's permission to do that? I authenticate with my thumb, right, or face, whatever you want to do. And at that time, I can say, yes, it's okay to use my data. If we can get to a point where we have decentralized technology that gives users more control over their data, we don't have to keep everything encrypted anymore. We can change PCI and credit card encryption. Now, there will be some things like my private health information. I still want that protected. That's a privacy thing. Privacy and security are related. They're not the same. When it comes to those military operations and you've got information that puts people's lives at danger, no, that still needs to be encrypted. That's where we see the value of post-quantum cryptography. But don't think we have to do everything the same as we're doing it today. It's not just a matter of changing encryption and decryption. It's embracing ancillary technologies to enable us to do things differently. And if we accept that, if we let go of some of the old ways that we used to do this stuff and say we're going to support these projects, we're going to build out these technologies, then you reduce the impact to the folks that you support and protect every day, whether it's folks you work with, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends. That's the impact of making these changes. So some strategic planning questions today, right? What can we do? Because I've talked about a lot of big picture stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that sounds like, boy, it'd be great if we could get there. How the hell are we going to get there? I understand that some of this is a little further off. Pulling it closer to the here and now. If you go back to your organization and just say, let's take a look at our data classification standard. Let's look at our sensitive data sets, business critical, right? What are they? Do we know where all that data is? Do we know what the elements are in that data? That kind of inventory is an important first step. And then you take a look at quantum computing and ask the questions, well, when quantum computing hits from an operational perspective, not a security perspective, it's operational, how's that going to hurt our business? Are we going to lose business to competitors because we've got an advantage now that goes away once quantum becomes more readily available? And at the same time, what are the business opportunities? Where are we getting hammered today as a company that, boy, if we had data, or if we had the opportunity to churn through really large data sets very quickly, where could we edge out our competition? Understand how quantum is going to affect your business before you look at the security stuff. And then the other question, what training do you need around web and quantum? I mean, I appreciate the university space. I worked at OSU for a number of years, and I'm a strong proponent of lifelong learning. A lot of that's from my stoicism background, but I firmly believe that we can't ever stop learning about the new stuff, right? Even if it's just like spending a Saturday here listening to Jerod rant and rave about quantum, right? That's an opportunity for us to take away something we didn't know or didn't understand before. We need to have these conversations with the leadership at our organizations. Do you have training for me? Do I understand how to build a smart contract? Do I understand the difference between the Ethereum blockchain and the Solana blockchain? Right there, there's some basic stuff you can learn today that's going to be the building blocks to get you to that 3 to 5 year goal of how can we leverage decentralized technology to minimize the potential threats of quantum computing. And then who are you going to partner with to address your gaps? And again, this comes from working with vendors. Not every vendor is evil. I can't vouch for all of them, but I can tell you that if you get in with the right group of folks and say, keep me in the loop, let me be your beta tester, right? Bounce ideas off me because this is my day job and this is a prospective vendor that you don't have when you're off developing your solution in a vacuum, right? If you partner with these organizations today, the stuff that they build is going to be better and it's going to be more useful to the people that you're supporting and that you're trying to protect. This list of recommended actions comes from the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs Research, which is part of Harvard. I'll leave this up here, but they had some recommended actions for if you're in the government space. Here's our recommended list of things that you should do today. If you're in the private business space, here's our recommended list of things you should do. And if you wanted to see more detail, the publication, Quantum Computing and Cybersecurity, is freely available on their website. It's a takeaway that you could go back and say, okay, this will give me a little more direction.
Do you have a recommendation for university? I don't see it here.
On what?
For university, recommendation for university to prepare this.
Oh, that's a good call out. Take it up. I mean, that's a higher ed institution. That's a miss on their part. That's a good call out. Yeah, put some university recommendations.
Related to that, you have a slide about the EDCA Act from...
Yes.
So they mentioned clearly about computer science graduate. But in my opinion, I think that this area is not just for computer science. So what is your opinion about that?
About where this lives in the university space? Yes. When I was at Ohio State, and this was 5+ years ago, maybe close to 7, they were trying to introduce a cybersecurity major. And the internal argument, the game of hot potato, right? Who's going to own it? Right? Fisher College of Business? Well, no, this is cybersecurity. That's a technical thing. Computer science? No, this, has business impact. We're doing research. This is more of a tactical, operational thing. It ended up in international affairs, counterterrorism. Yeah, right? Blew my mind. But that was the closest that you found somebody who had the ownership and the passion for it. From a technical standpoint, computer science absolutely has to be involved. I'll stand by that. Because what we're talking about from a technical level can easily be misconstrued or misinterpreted once it gets to the business side. But if I had my druthers, I would have parallel programs, and I don't know that universities do this, but it's a blend between whatever the College of Business is and the College of Science, and then maybe international terrorism for kicks. That's a whole nother thing. And I'm almost done here. Last few slides. If you only do 3 things, right? And these are if I'm talking low-hanging fruit, these are the apples that have already fallen on the ground. If you've got 128-bit AES keys in play, next time you change them, explore the production impact of bumping them up to 256, because it's going to take more compute to do the encrypt, decrypt. If it slows the apps down to the point that they're unusable, you've done more harm than good. Don't do that. But if you can, making it harder for this data to be compromised, it just gives you more time to make those changes, kicking the can down the road. Explore emerging technologies like blockchain. Blockchain is not just a public ledger. You can do full compute in the blockchain. A lot of folks will look at blockchain and say, well, that's just an immutable ledger where I can put a historical record of data. No, it's more than that. Explore those other options to see what you can do. Passwordless authentication and self-sovereign identity, I think, are 2 of the things that we're talking about. You see a lot of SSI. I read a white paper from World Economic Forum a few years back where they were talking about SSI. But the group, like the FIDO2 Alliance or FIDO Alliance, what they're doing with passwordless authentication, these are, again, building blocks that help us get to a different way of doing things. And then Etsy, at etsi.org, migration strategies and recommendations to quantum safe schemes. They've got a brief white paper. I'll go ahead and tell you avoid the clickbait. Inventory compilation, prepare your migration plan, and then execute migration. That's what it boils down to. Figure out where you're going to be most impacted, make a plan, and act on it. But those are the 3 things I'd recommend you do today. And then for further reading, I've got an article from Forbes, American Scientist, and then the Quantum Security World Economic Forum is a fantastic resource, folks. If you are not following that group as a cybersecurity professional, you're missing out, because what they're talking about impacts so much of what we do and where we're going. But their call out for us, Quantum Security Coalition, it's a big one. And then I've got a couple of YouTube videos linked here throughout that I think are useful. And then IBM's got a lot out there. I am wiped out. I'm right at 3 o'clock. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. That's how I stay in touch with people when I'm sitting at home, being a full-on introvert. If you want to talk, if you want a copy of this presentation, PDF, you can shoot me a note at jerod@brennenconsulting.com, or you can shoot. Oh, and John's already got it. You already got it on the website?
No.
But it will be.
It will be.
It will be. It'll be out on the OISF website. Lots of ways for you to get your hands on this information. We are not trying to hide it. I want you to take it. I want you to use it. I want you to have an advantage when it comes to getting ahead of this. Yeah, you've absolutely got it. I want more people to know about this than I can get in front of. So, folks, thank you. I've got like 0 minutes left for questions, but we've had some interest. Any questions here at the very end before I shut up for real? All right. I really appreciate the time today. Please don't hesitate to hit me up if you want to keep the conversation going. Thank you. Thank you. I'll put this to use.
There